Right, high up on my list of wants is a camera that doesn't just cut out and not let me know it's cut out, but we'll see. Hi, welcome back to the shed. This video is not quite what I planned, but we'll put it out there anyway. I get to show you how you can make your DualShock 4 controller look pretty awesome in a short space of time, quite easily, and for very little money. So let's take a look. Right, so what we've got here is a perfectly good DualShock 4. It's the original model, it's not the fancy new one with the LEDs on top, but it does work absolutely fine. It holds its charge, the buttons all work okay, it's responsive enough. The thumbsticks are maybe a little bit worn and it's a little bit dirty, but other than that it's perfectly fine. So by doing this I could be taking something that works absolutely great and end up ruining it. But we'll see. The issue with this is that it's all black and I've actually got three that all look exactly the same, and it's hard to tell which one's which one's got a full charge and so on, and it's just a little bit boring. I like to be able to mix these things up a little bit. I looked into buying replacement shells, which is a job I have done before, but the issue with those, depending on which release of the control pad you've got, different shells fit, different screws are in different places. So what I thought was that the quality of these shells is actually pretty good and the repro one's not always that good. So I thought what I might do with this one is keep the original shell but swap out the buttons and thumbsticks. So I got this pack of light blue buttons and thumbsticks, but to mix things up a little bit I'm going to use some of the original parts. I'm also going to try out some of these aluminium thumbsticks, and you can see I haven't got the ones to match. I've gone with the light blue and the pink because I think it's going to make quite an interesting mix and should hopefully look alright on the black background. It might end up looking terrible, but it'll stand out from my other controllers, so we shall see. I'm hoping it looks good. Now this is a well-used pad. It is a little bit sticky and grubby, so I'm going to give it a full clean up as I dismantle it and sort it all out as well. So the button set was £3.95 from eBay. The two analog sticks are actually aluminium, the metal ones. They were £3.99. So we're looking at less than £8 to create a completely new look to my controller, which is pretty good value, I think. So provided it works, we're okay. In terms of tools and equipment, I did mention about wanting to clean this up. So I've got my usual gear. I've got a toothbrush, I've got baby wipes, I've got some microfiber cloths. They're going to be used to clean up the shell and the parts and getting the gaps. In terms of taking it apart, all I can see so far is some crosshead screws on the bottom. So I've got a small crosshead screwdriver. I've also got a spudger to try and separate out the parts. Bearing in mind these are quite cheap buttons, the mold quality doesn't look perfect, particularly on the L&R triggers. So I've got my waistline removal tool thing that'll just sort of scrape off any excess plastic that we don't want, and a pair of tweezers as well. If I need other tools, we'll see how we go during the process. But first job is to take this thing apart. Right, let's stop it there and talk about the screws. The screws are actually quite dirty, so what I'm going to do is clean those up. The screwdriver, I had to try two different screwdrivers to get them out. The screws have got full of dirt, which made it difficult to turn those, so I'm going to clean those up a little bit, and like I did on one of my other controllers, I think it was a Dreamcast controller I'm going to clean up the ends of the screws and possibly put a little bit of black paint on the ends of them just to get them looking like new, because they are all a little bit grubby looking, so we'll see how that goes. There we go. So that will dry matte black and they'll look great when they go back in the pad later. Right, let's have a look at taking the pad apart. Right, well that was not easy. So if you're doing it yourself, I suggest you don't wing it like I did, and you actually find out exactly which parts to apply pressure. Have we got away with it? Everything looks alright on that half, and on here it's these clips that I've had break on me in the past and they were okay. Everything down here is okay. Looks like I've got away with it, so that's okay. Now where these parts meet up they're a little bit grubby, so I'm going to give those a wipe down and a clean, but this part can all stay in place, nothing else to be replaced there. The shoulder buttons, these are going to be taken out and replaced, so there's some springs and things to fight with there, and then get all the hair, how's hair got in there? Get all the hair out. We need to remove this panel to be able to access these buttons though, so the back is going to go out of the way for when I'm doing my cleaning, and I'll just try and separate everything out here so I can access those buttons. On this one I've got the silicone pads that'll maybe need a bit of a clean up, but my buttons, we'll think about what's going to be replaced there. So just turn it over, everything just drops out of there. I think I've tried these before, and the touch panel piece that comes with these kits tends to be pretty poor. Whatever conductivity it is on the touch panel, sensitivity tends to be quite poor, and it looks a little bit garish in the middle of the controller there. There's just this bright blue panel, isn't going to look great. I want to make it a stylish mod as much as I can, so I'm going to keep the black panel, so that'll need cleaning up, and that's going to go back in with the parts on the back, so I don't need to remove any of that. I'm going to lose all these buttons. Not sure about the home button because it's got the little PlayStation logo. I might keep that one for there. We'll see how that looks. Let's check out these bits. So that's not being used. These I might use on a different project, but or I might end up using them if the metal ones are awful. My D-pad I want. My 4 buttons I'm going to want. My options button and my back button. Is this back button? Share button. It's start and back as far as I'm concerned. And then my triggers. Right, so as I said before about the triggers, particularly L2 and R2, they're going to be comfortable enough to touch on the trigger, but on the bottom there's a bit of a mould line there, and that might end up catching on the inside, so I'm going to clean that up a little bit with my mould line removal tool. Right, they're all fine, so let's see what's going to look best. Grip everything in place, we can have a quick look. Yeah, that's not bad. So you joined me at a point where I thought I'd filmed the whole process, but it seems I haven't. So here's what I've done. I've just put the main assembly back in. I've kept the shoulder buttons because they didn't fit on this particular model. I've kept the touchpad because I've found in the past that they're not very responsive if you use the third-party one. The touch sensitivity through the plastic is gone, so it just becomes a push button. So I've kept the black one of those, and as a result, because I've got the black there and there, I've kept that fairly centered. I found that the blue button just sort of interrupted the flow of it a bit too much, looked a bit tacky, so that's gone. So I've got the blue on the buttons, and I've got my pink analog sticks that seem to fit nicely, and I'm just going to put the whole thing back together. The battery was the last thing to go in, and its frame, and now what I've got to do is just connect up this ribbon. So the blue section faces outwards, and that just goes in here. You just line up and gently push it in, putting more of the pressure on the blue plastic bit rather than the ribbon itself. I'll hook those bits on there, make sure my triggers come through. That all seems okay. Hold that in position, and then you've got to try and hook these over there and there, and then gently get everything back in position without breaking anything. It should just pop together for the most part. Just clip all the way around the edges, and then you've got the screws to go in. So my screws I painted earlier and they should be dry now, so I'll get those ready for going in. There we've got the finished controller. This camera doesn't seem to be picking up the colours that well, but we're not too bad. So we've got like the nice bright blues here, the option and share button. Everything's clicked back together okay, but they don't seem to stick up that much, so they may be slightly different to the original, but they do work. Like, they're fairly flush, but when you press them they do work. The face buttons and the D-pad fine. The analogue seem alright, I'll have to give them a bit of a test, but in terms of how it looks, I really like it. So I'm going to go and give it a test and see how I get on. So there you go, we've ended up with this, which I think is awesome, but we've not ended up with the video that I hoped for. It's not quite the tutorial I was anticipating, but to be fair, from the way I went about getting this thing apart and how smoothly it didn't go, you don't really want to be using that for a tutorial anyway. There are plenty of other tutorials out there. But what I did want to get across is how quickly and cheaply and easily you can get an old neglected controller looking like something that you really want to pick up and play with. I'm going to be using this as my main controller for the next few weeks, and I'm going to see how it goes. I'm curious about the aluminium thumbsticks. They feel interesting. I think it's just because I'm so used to the plastic ones. The aluminium feels a little strange, perhaps a little sharp on the edges, I don't know. I played for a couple of hours earlier and it felt just a little bit strange, but now my thumbs feel fine, so I'll just have to see how that goes. I don't know whether they'll wear a bit smoother with time, but in terms of the level of control, they're really good. And what I find with the plastic ones is your thumbs get a little bit sweaty after a while and you lose that control and you end up in those like boss battles and you end up slipping off and things. I don't think that's going to happen with these, so I'll need to give it more testing to give it a, you know, a proper tryout, but first impressions good. And the fact that I paid like less than £8 for these extra buttons, I didn't use the entire button set, but I don't think I needed to. I think the subtle little changes like this make a big impact. It's less is more, as they say. So I'm glad I didn't use all of those buttons, and I don't think having the black shoulder buttons is a particularly big problem. So if you want to give this a go, I'd say definitely do it. It's a nice cheap way to really breathe new life into an old controller, but maybe have a look elsewhere for a guide on how to get these controllers apart. Once they're open, swapping the bits out and even putting them back together is very, very easy. The difficult part's getting them open. If you haven't already got one or two, get yourself some of these little spudgers. That's exactly what you'll need for getting them apart. Or sometimes you'll have those sort of like these from kits you get for opening up mobile phones. They're all right, but the spudgers are the best thing because separating those layers can be tricky. But that's about the only difficult part of it, and even then, if you make a mess of that and you crack a few bits, there's still the screws, 4 main screws to hold it together, so it won't be an absolute disaster. Give it a go. You know, what have you got to lose apart from a perfectly functioning controller? Okay, maybe don't give it a go. I'll leave that up to you. Anyway, see you next time. If you want to see more like this, subscribe, and hopefully I'll get some slightly more complete videos up soon. Cheers. Bye.